My name is Corey. I was housed in Bedford Correctional Facility in the nursery. I was in between 5 and 6 months pregnant when I arrived there.
My name is Ursulina, and I was pregnant while incarcerated at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility.
My name is Tina. I was incarcerated at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. I arrived 5 months pregnant.
My name is Maria, and I was incarcerated at Bedford Hills when I was pregnant in 2010.
The Correctional Association is a nonprofit criminal justice policy advocacy organization that has the unique legislative authority to monitor prison conditions in New York State.
Our Women in Prison Project and our Coalition for Women Prisoners joined in partnership with a number of other organizations and individuals to help lead a campaign in 2009 to pass a law that bans the barbaric practice of shackling incarcerated women during labor, during delivery, and after delivery during recovery. And that bill was signed into law on August 26, 2009.
We found through our prison monitoring work that in the last 5 years since the law was passed, it has been violated numerous times. We interviewed or surveyed 27 women who gave birth after the 2009 law was passed, and 23 out of those 27 were shackled in violation of the law.
So women are still routinely being shackled on the way to the hospital to give birth, even when they're in labor. They're still routinely being shackled after they give birth, even immediately after they give birth, and even for very long periods of time, even when they're interacting with their newborns, breastfeeding their babies. And they're also being shackled on the way back to the prison, even in full shackles with waist chains, just days after women have C-sections.
I went into labor. They took me to the hospital in a van, and yes, they shackled me while I was in labor having contractions. They shackled me to the waist, to the black box, to the ankles, in the van, all the way to the hospital. They didn't take me out of the shackles until I was actually put in a room and examined, which was about a half hour later as I'm standing here with contractions. They finally took me out of the shackles. I was then examined and seen that I was only 2.5, maybe 3 centimeters dilated, so they reshackled me and took me back to the prison, where I sat in the infirmary for about 4 or 5 hours until my water finally broke, and then they made me sit there for another half an hour before they reshackled me and then put me on an ambulance.
The first time that they took me to the hospital at 11:30 at night, they did cuff me, put me in the van. When I got to the hospital, they took me to the delivery area and they uncuffed me when it was time for me to remove my clothing. I got into bed. They checked to see how many centimeters I was dilated. I was only dilated 2. So they sent me back to the prison at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then on the way back, they didn't cuff me. I was uncuffed in the van. And when we pulled up to the gate at Bedford, that's when they recuffed me. They put me back up in the infirmary. I was in the bed, tossing and turning. I kept calling the nurse. I kept telling her I'm in pain. I don't feel good. She came in. She was like, oh, yeah, you're dilated approximately 4 to 5 centimeters. Call the ambulance. Immediately, the male officer, took out the cuffs and just cuffed me. And EMS was like, what are you doing? This woman is in labor. And they was like, oh, this is protocol. And they was like, no, if you do not uncuff her, we're not taking her.
The ambulance came. I was shackled to the gurney, and I was looking at the clock, and it would barely get to the next minute, and the blinding pain was coming. We get to the hospital. Oh my God, this is horrible just thinking about it. So they keep telling me to be quiet, like be quiet. And now it's like the pain is so bad I can't talk. It's just like I'm dying. Anyway, the doctor told me there's no time for an epidural. You're going to give birth in 5 minutes. And I think I did.
I just had a doctor's appointment to get induced. And it was the same thing, the hands and the feet. You can't even climb on the bus. They gotta help you to get on the van because you can't even lift your feet. They unshackled me and they cuffed one of my hands to like the metal of the bed. So I was like that the whole time. Even without getting induced, I started to feel the contractions and I started to feel like my daughter was coming out. They still had me cuffed to the bed. Like when I had to push, I was pushing, holding the metal because I was cuffed to the side. Even though they seen it that I was in pain and there was officers there and I couldn't go nowhere, but they just never even thought about it. They didn't even remove my cuffs for me to hold my baby. I had to hold my baby with one hand, and it was only for like 2 to 3 seconds. Then they took my baby away and they finished with me, and I went to the prison ward. They didn't even take my handcuffs off until after I was stitched up. The placenta was taken out, everything, until I was in the prison ward. And I didn't see my baby until like the next day.